Okay, so let's get into this. Today we're doing a deep dive into something that really turns the way we look at society on its head. It's called ethnomethodology.
And it's the work of Harold Garfinkel, which, was a huge shift in social theory. Most sociology asks, okay, what are the rules that people follow, right?
What's the structure exactly?
But Garfinkel just flips that entirely. Yeah, he asks, how do people, in their everyday lives, moment to moment, use these practical methods to give everyone the impression that there are rules?
So it's not about finding the structure. It's about watching the active structuring. It's the sociology of, I don't know, making a cup of coffee but taking it dead seriously.
That's it exactly. His whole mission was, and this is a quote, to look at the formal properties of common sense activities. And the key policy was, well, it was absolute. Everyday life is the only reference point that matters.
And if your fancy scientific model doesn't match how people actually, live their lives,
Then your model is wrong, not the people. And this is just a world away from someone like Durkheim, who saw social facts as these objective things that exist outside of us.
okay, so the whole thing hinges on this idea of accountability. If reality is something we're constantly building, how do we make it feel so smooth and solid? How do we make our actions make sense to each other?
That is the absolute central puzzle. And making our actions, observable and reportable. That relies on these very specific processes. Garfinkel called them reflexive and incarnate.
Okay, hold on. Those are some heavy terms. Let's unpack those. Reflexive. What do we actually mean by that?
Reflexive just means that the way you make sense of something is also creating the sense of that thing. Think about a simple conversation.
Uh-huh.
The meaning of my hello depends on the situation, right? But the way you interpret it, that actually creates the context for what comes next. It's a feedback loop.
So the understanding of the event is part of the event itself. And what about incarnate?
Incarnate means the rules aren't written down in some rule book in the sky. They are physically part of the action. You don't apply a rule to a handshake. The handshake is the rule in action. You can't separate them.
It's the invisible scaffolding of our reality.
Precisely.
So if the scaffolding is invisible, let's start with something we can see, or at least hear our conversations. This gets us to the puzzle of indexicality.
Right? And this is one of Garfinkel's most powerful ideas. Most of what we say is essentially indexical. The meaning isn't fixed.
It's totally dependent on context.
Completely on who's talking, where they are, their whole life story, their tone of voice. If I say that's wild, you need to know what that I'm pointing at to get what I mean.
Which is just, it's amazing we can communicate at all. I mean, we're constantly dealing with this radical ambiguity, but we understand each other instantly.
What that ability to seem rational, consistent and logical, that's a social skill. It's a performance. And we pull it off using what he called accounting practices.
This is the secret work we're all doing all the time. What are some of these unspoken rules,
You have this famous trio, etc. Unless and let it pass.
etc.?
The etc. clause is huge. It's the assumption that more could be said, but we don't need to. I can just say, you know how it is, and you get it. I don't have to explain the entire history of our relationship.
You're just trusting that the other person can fill in the blanks.
For all practical purposes. Yeah. And Garfinkel showed how fragile this is with this one task he gave his students. He called it filling out the sketchy.
Oh, I love this one. It sounds so simple.
It does. They just took a short, normal conversation. Something like, how are you? Fine. Bit tired, and he told them, okay, now write down everything someone would need to know to understand that exchange.
And it just explodes, doesn't it? Suddenly you have to explain their medical history, what tired means for this person, their job, their relationship.
Everything. It became impossible, and the big insight was that we don't understand each other by matching up all this substantive knowledge. We understand each other because we recognize that something was said according to a rule.
The form was right, so we accept the content.
Exactly. The method was recognizable, right? That's the work. We accept it as rational, even if it's full of holes.
So if these rules are invisible, the only way you can really study them is to break them. Which brings us to his most famous legacy, the preaching demonstrations.
And he was very clear they were demonstrations, not experiments. He wasn't testing a hypothesis, he was just disrupting the scene. But unnoticed background stuff,
Just to make it visible,
to show how hard we work to keep it all stable.
and the chaos that follows. That really shows you something. Let's talk about the literal interrogator.
This one is brilliant. Students were told to go home and in any conversation pretend they didn't understand any of the unspoken context, to take everything literally.
So if a friend says I had a flat tire,
The student would have to ask, what do you mean by had? Do you still possess it? What is its shape?
which must have just driven people insane.
Completely. Garfinkel's notes are full of subjects getting bewildered, then confused, then just angry. One person, after being pushed and pushed for specifics, just screamed, you know what I mean? Drop dead.
Wow. So just asking for clarity gets you a death threat. That's just how much these unspoken rules are a moral contract.
It's a moral violation. You're not just being difficult, you're acting like the other person is an incompetent member of society. You're attacking their world.
And that moral force is even clearer in the border attitude demonstrates.
Oh yeah, here students went home but had to act as if they were just boarders renting a room in their own house.
So super polite, formal, only speaking when spoken to.
With their own parents, their own siblings.
And what happened? Total meltdown.
Families were, quote, stupefied. The students were immediately hit with accusations. Why are you being so mean? Are you out of your mind or just stupid? The family had no framework to understand this polite, distant behavior from their own child.
There's that story about the student asking his mom for permission to get a snack.
Yes, and she just lost it. What do you mean? Mind if you have a snack? You've been raiding this fridge for 17 years. She saw it as a hostile act, an attack on the very definition of what it means to be a family.
So even when they explained it was for a class, the damage was sort of done.
The trust was shaken. Yeah, it showed that these background expectancies aren't just polite norms. They are the moral foundation of our relationships.
Which leads right into Garfinkel's biggest critique of sociology. This idea of the judgmental dope.
Right? The dope is this idea that people are just cultural puppets, who blindly follow rules they've internalized. Garfinkel says no, we are constantly actively working to produce reality.
Even when the facts don't fit.
Especially when the facts don't fit. And the Gardner Medical School applicant study is the perfect example of this.
Okay, set this up for us.
He had a group of pre-med students listen to a recording of a fake interview, and the applicant Gardner sounds awful, just arrogant, evasive, can't speak properly.
So the students who know the game all agree this guy's a total loser, unsuitable for medicine.
Unanimously. And then comes the breach. Garfinkel gives them Gardner's actual file. It's wrong, and it's stellar. Straight A's in science, tons of volunteer work. Father is, as a powerful VP, objectively a perfect candidate.
And the students didn't just go, oh, I guess we were wrong.
Not at all. They did these incredible mental gymnastics to make the new facts fit their first impression.
They started making up stories.
Completely. Things like, oh, he probably has an inferiority complex. That's why he boasts. Or his dad probably made him do the volunteer work. They work so hard to preserve their social judgment over the objective facts.
That's incredible. And he even measured their anxiety right.
It was amazing before the breach, the correlation between their belief in the rules of being a pre-med and their anxiety was basically zero after it shot up to 0.651.
So they were feeling actual measurable stress trying to hold their world together.
Proving they were active sense makers, not passive dopes.
We see that same kind of agency pop up in the bargaining experiment too.
Yes, where students had to go into a department store and try to bargain for something with a fixed price tag.
I can feel the anxiety just thinking about that.
Most of them were terrified. The fear was mostly in the anticipation, just walking up to the salesperson. About 20% couldn't even do it once.
But something changed. After they tried it a few times,
They discovered it was possible. They succeeded. And after a few trials, they started reporting that they actually enjoyed it. They learned that the one price rule wasn't the law of physics. It was a social agreement. and they could challenge it.
And this hidden work isn't just in, personal life. It's how official data gets made, like with the clinic coder.
Right? Coders in a clinic had these super detailed manuals on how to classify patient files. But in practice, to make sense of a doctor's messy notes or a patient's vague story, they had to use the same tools, the etc., and let it pass.
They had to fill in the gaps to make the story fit a category.
Exactly. They weren't just recording facts, they were producing a persuasive version of the events, so it could become an official, clean statistic.
So even the hardest data is at its core an organizational achievement.
Built on the same common sense methods we use to talk to each other.
There is probably no better illustration of this constant, exhausting work of creating reality than the case of Agnes.
An extraordinary case. Agnes was an intersex person raised as a boy who was successfully living her life as a woman and was seeking surgery. Her entire life was a conscious performance of accountability.
Because for most people, for normals, as Garfinkel says, sex is just a natural fact, male or female. That's it.
It's a moral dichotomy, and Agnes's very existence challenged that. So her life's work wasn't just about acting feminine. It was about proving she had a legitimate, natural claim to being a woman.
And the practical work that took is just.
The strategies are incredible. At one point, she needs to pass a physical for a job, so she fakes a kidney infection to get a urine sample from her female roommate to use as her own.
She had to manage her own biology. And then for her surgery, the doctors themselves had to get in on the performance.
They did. They coordinated with her to tell her employer that she had a severe bladder infection to explain her absence. The lie had to be a shared organizational accomplishment.
Even a simple trip required this massive effort. She talks about losing 25 kilograms and practicing feminine movements in a mirror.
And managing questions about her diet by just saying. Lots of people go on diets, don't they? Using that etc. clause to deflect scrutiny. It's a masterclass.
And she even saw her own learning process in real time on a bus trip. She realized she was learning how to be a lady from the way soldiers were interacting with her.
Right? She said she not only acted like a lady, but learned from their responses. It was constant real-time feedback and adjustment.
And all of it was done to protect the status that most people never, ever have to think about. She was fully aware of the work involved in making society look normal.
The work that's hidden from the rest of us.
So when you put it all together, the big takeaway here is that every single thing we take for granted, a conversation, a statistic, a social category like gender, it's all a monumental achievement.
A continuous one.
Yeah. We don't just live in a social structure. We are performing the methods that make it appear real every single second.
Which brings us back to the big challenge for social science. If the tools of science, logic, consistency, rationality, are the very things that are missing from and even disruptive to everyday life, what does that mean for how we study people?
It's like we're judging fish on their ability to climb trees. We're criticizing people for not being good scientists when their entire job is just to be good members of their society.
That's the lesson. If you want to understand social life, you have to look at the messy, practical methods people actually use, not the clean rules you think they should be following.
So here's a thought for you to take with you. The next time you're in a conversation and you think someone obviously meant something, just stop for a second.
And ask yourself, okay, how do I know that? What did I just fill in?
What etc. clause did my brain just use? What background assumption did I lean on to make that meaning feel so obvious?
And if you're feeling brave, try withholding that assumption for just a moment. Give yourself the literalist test and just see how quickly your social world starts to feel a little bit wobbly.
Today's book review was an interesting confrontation. We confronted how background information we don't question shapes our daily lives.
Yes, when we pulled this foundation, we saw how people stumbled.
Should we recommend our viewers to read this book thoroughly?
Yes, let's hope for days filled with books until our next book review.